This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 110, where we're talking about Jessica Jones on our recap episode.
Alias investigations. We've got cases and shit, so leave a message.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders. This is Derek, one of your hosts of Defenders TV Podcast, and we're here with episode 110 of our podcast, and we're talking about Jessica Jones for a bit of a recap before we get to the Defenders.
Yes, I'm one of your other hosts, Chris, and it's Chris Jones. No relation at this point to Jessica Jones, although I wish I did.
Hi, and I am rounding out the group as John, your third and final host.
Yes, not John Jones.
Not John Jones, no.
That's a different universe altogether.
Absolutely. Before we get into this, I just wanted to say thanks to some of our listeners over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast, who asked us to do this. They were saying that we do an episode by episode coverage of each of the shows, but we don't really do a wrap up at the end to kind of give an overview of the show and what we thought overall. So I thought this was a really good idea, and we're going to try our best to get one for each of our Defenders as we go. We have obviously Daredevil, we have Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist all making up the Defenders. The show is coming out on the 18th of August worldwide, so we're going to try and do a little recap of each of the episodes or each of the series so far and try and get them out in time for the Defenders. So thanks for the suggestion, really good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and of course, if you want to listen to the rest of the Defenders 101, as well as Daredevil that we did for DTVP 109, as well as all of the individual episodes for the Defenders series previously, then of course you can just head on over to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes for Apple Podcasts, or you can just search for Defenders TV Podcast in any good podcast catcher.
And of course, you can join the conversation with us over on Twitter at DefendersCast and over on the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast.
Absolutely. And if you want to send in feedback to us as you watch the episodes of The Defenders, just email us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com, just with the episode that you're talking about, because we don't spoil ahead. Make sure you mark what episode it is you're talking about, or you can record your thoughts over at our website at defenderstvpodcast.com. With all that said, time to get into Jessica Jones, and I can unequivocally say after 60 odd episodes so far, I think, of the Defenders shows. Feels like that anyway. This is my absolute favourite show. Jessica Jones is the one that hit me right in my sweet spot for TV shows overall.
I am in complete agreement there. I think the creator and showrunner, Melissa Rosenberg, along with the cast, were absolutely fantastic, and this is my favourite Defenders show so far, and that is not to take away, say, from Daredevil at all, because I remember just being absolutely gobsmacked when that came out, just how well they did it. But I think here it was just the entire concept of this show through the 13 episodes, how it flowed, and of course, you know, with any fantastic protagonist, there is the antagonist, and I think we have, probably with Wilson Fisk as well, but certainly in combination with the heroine of the piece, Jessica Jones, and the flawed heroine of the piece, which made it even more interesting. Mm-hmm. You have a absolutely despicable antagonist in the Purple Man, played by David Tennant. Mm-hmm. You know, Kilgrave. He was just a perfect marry to the vulnerability of Jessica Jones with the idea of her alcohol abuse, her kind of down and out kind of vibe that she had. And I think this idea of a powerful woman and life after abuse, you know, and getting that confidence back. Her flatmates, her friends, you know, Trish there, all of this really just solidified an excellent, cohesive series for me. Mm-hmm.
You literally hit upon the main themes that we've kind of all agreed when we were going through this series, that this whole show was about life after abuse.
Yeah.
PTSD, the many terminologies, the clinical names you want to call it. This is how you can survive after you've been through a rape, both mental, physical, whichever way you want to classify it. In this show, there was both. And also, as you said, how you can be in this case, super-powered heroine or a woman in today's United States of America, in today's society. And I didn't think that these would hit home for me personally as much as they did. I have never suffered for any of these things. I am not a woman. I'm not superpowered. So in theory, this should not resonate with me so much. But as you said, the showrunner, Melissa Rosenberg, the characters, the actors, the actresses, they were all, it was so well done that it brought it managed to resonate with not just me, but many, many other people around the world, which is very interesting. Yeah. But before we get into kind of more discussions about it, do you guys want to kind of give a quick synopsis of the season as a whole? And then from that, we can then discuss kind of how those points played out and more our thoughts on that season.
Yeah, there's quite a lot that obviously went on. It's a 13-episode season, but to boil it down to its basic components, the general synopsis for the season is, after gaining superpowers from a car accident that killed her family as a teenager, Jessica Jones was taken in by a young actress, Trish Walker, and her abusive mother, Dorothy. After using her powers to save Malcolm Ducasse, a social worker in New York, Jessica encounters Kilgrave, a man with the power to control minds. Kilgrave kidnaps and forces her to carry out a relationship with him and murder a woman who is threatening him. This murder breaks Kilgrave's holds over Jessica, and she escapes from him. Kilgrave resurfaces and starts to control people all around Jessica, from Malcolm Ducasse to young Hope Schlottman and former Special Forces operative turned police officer Will Simpson, all the way to the unbreakable Luke Cage, all to try and get back at Jessica. Unable to let these innocents be hurt and tortured by Kilgrave like she was, Jessica works with Jerry Hogarth and Trish Walker to hunt down and take out Kilgrave for good. That's the general synopsis. I think that kind of is the whole series boiled down. There's loads of characters in there, loads of stuff that's going on. And for me, as I say, it is my favourite show, but I think it is a 13-episode series, so there are some, there's lags, there's little things that it's not a perfect show, but the one thing that carried me through the whole lot of it is Jessica. Kristen Ritter's performance in this character. She's previously a comedy actress, and had done Breaking Bad, was kind of her big breakout role for a niche show, I suppose. So she's done drama, she's done comedy in The Bitch in Apartment 13, I think is the name of it. So she's done those types of shows, but she's never really held a show. She's never been the central character in a drama series like this where so much is going on. And she was fantastic for me. Really looking forward to her appearance in Defenders. But for me, she just held this show together.
100%. I was the same as you. Kind of going into this, I remember when they announced the casting, I was a bit like, really? Did Kristen? I wasn't a fan of her personally in Breaking Bad. But I did enjoy her comedic timing and etc. within The Bitch in Apartment 13, and it was a good. I just didn't see the fit at that point. I have never been so happy to be proven wrong. She does, from when we've seen the runs in the comic books of this character, in Pulse, etc. The character that has been defined and built out is really interesting, and the fact that Kristen is able to play that flawed character that is Jessica and bring her to life in the way that she does, for all her positive traits and her negative traits, the alcoholism, the PTSD, but then also the positive is in the loyalty, determination, I could continue on.
Her big one really is she never runs away from a fight, and that's kind of embodies the character. She never wants to be controlled again. So even with things like the really awful thing that's happening with Luke Cage throughout the season, even standing up and eventually telling him that the reason she sought him out is because, well, she murdered his wife.
Yeah, definitely. She's a fighter, she's a scrapper, and I think completely with Chris, it is that contrast, I think, between that darkness of this show and the brutality of it with the hope of an out, and really great little moments of levity as well within this darkness. I mean, you go from Hope Schlottman kills her parents. You have the brutality of 1,000 cuts with Jerry Hogarth and her partner. You have Kilgrave's parents, and the brutality of that soundproof room and what goes on in there. You have even just the guy that, just on the offhand from Kilgrave, who he tells a guy to go over to the railings and stand looking at the railings for the rest of his life. And the director and the script writers just have the foresight, whoever it was that decided it, just to have a panning shot where that guy is still there and he's wet his pants. And, that kind of brutality of this, coupled to, the hope that her and Luke Cage might, have a lasting relationship, that she may escape the clutches of Kilgrave, her friendship with, Malcolm, with Trish, all those aspects, I think is so well done.
Yeah.
We have that first little bit of a crossover with having Luke Cage in there, but it's done in a really meaningful way. You have Jerry Hogarth as well, who then ends up in Iron Fist.
Yeah, quite happily.
So some nice little touches and nods to the other shows, either with people in them, or just little references. And of course, we do have the absolute classic moment of Luke Cage with the angle grinder and his abs. I mean, you can't escape. I mean, it was slightly crazy. At the time, I remember going, did that just happen? Because it seemed slightly out of sorts, with the whole series. But actually, it was just amazingly silly and fun. It's like the Alias door as well. The glass getting smashed, it getting broken over again. And the
bed sex as well.
And the bed sex,
Well, obviously the bed sex, but the fact that they break the bed having sex.
Yeah.
This is super-powered humans having sex together, and they don't shy away from it in the show, which is something that was a huge shock when we saw it at New York Comic Con. It was a huge shock how adult they were going with this show. Not that Daredevil season 1 wasn't adult, but it was more adult on the violence side. This show was going more adult in its topics that it was covering, and the kind of the content of the show overall was more for a different audience. I've now met a ton of people who've just watched Jessica Jones because the series itself appealed to them, and they do play down the superpowers quite a lot in the show. But there's enough there for comic book fans. There's enough there for other people that are just interested in seeing good drama.
Well, absolutely. Other than a few leaps and a few bounds, and maybe a little bit of takeoff, really, it is, it's played down, it's subdued here, definitely. But, angle grinder.
Okay, for my part, the angle grinder was less of an appeal. For me personally, the David Tennant's character of Kilgrave, his performance in this, I have remembered him as the Doctor. He will always hold a special place in my heart as the Doctor. But seeing the actor portray the Purple Man, Kilgrave, in this was a relishment, if I want to call it that. I enjoyed every part of it. I enjoyed hating him and being disturbed by this character. This is the first bad guy I can say within the Marvel, probably the only actually, outside of Wilson Fisk, as John said earlier, who you actually loathe. And I think Wilson Fisk you don't loathe. They built his character in such a way that you can kind of empathise and see where he's coming from, etc.
For most of the season, yeah.
Yeah. This character is despicable.
Yeah.
It is the full usage of his powers. But they do, in the series, show you how he was formulated. They built... It's not just one of those throwaway... oh, he's just a bad guy who likes doing bad things. You actually see why he became who he is.
Definitely.
He was also abused, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, you know, whether it's just purely by chance of the fact that Jessica Jones was the second of the Defenders to be released on Netflix, I think you're right. You know, Wilson Fisk, you are asked to kind of get into his skin and understand his motives and to, in effect, sympathize with him. With Kilgrave, the contrast between, you know, the Daredevil bad guy of Wilson Fisk, even though ultimately by the end you see him as being a thug, you know, you're asked to empathize. Kilgrave, it's difficult to do that, even though you see the formulation of what's made him. You know, as soon as you see him with his parents, you kind of go, there is no hope.
Yeah.
Here, because he is absolutely despicable, as well as a host of other things. And the other great thing, I think, that they show a formulation of a new character with police officer Will Simpson, who ultimately starts off as, you know, a regular good cop and gradually just starts to get turned into someone who has very dubious motives. You know, he kills the detective in the sound room, you know, and he starts to have his breakdown and become threatening to Trish.
Yeah.
So you see that formulation as well on screen with Will Simpson, not to the same effect as Kilgrave. And I'm sure Jessica Jones too will take his character in a different way. But, you know, all this stuff that is going on with Jessica, you know, gives her a certain perspective on life, which I think is really unique for this Defenders coming together. It's probably why, you know, she's a bit more weary and a bit more sarcastic towards the other Defenders, like we saw in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing. She doesn't take herself too seriously as a superhero, and you can see, I think, as you said on the, you know, when we went through the San Diego Comic-Con trailer for the Defenders, that's why she's almost kind of, in her mocking of Iron Fist and Daredevil, it's kind of almost a subtext for lighten up, will you?
Absolutely.
You know,
You
you're
haven't
not
gone through
the
anything that I've
be all
gone
and
through.
end all of this universe.
Yeah. In terms of Kilgrave, one of the interesting things I thought that they did with his character was they did try and explain it from his point of view. So like they do with all of the characters, but it wasn't to make you sympathize or empathize with the character. They were trying to tell you he was all powerful from the moment he realized he was able to control people. He was all powerful to those people. And then he tried to expand that power to be able to control more and more people. And it's what he does with it that makes him so interesting to watch and difficult to watch. It's that he can tell them to do anything at all, and the things he tells people to do around him are absolutely despicable. The fact that he's going in and just taking people's homes out from underneath them and making them say it's okay, telling people who have children to lock their children in wardrobes while he's in the house, having the gay couple kill each other effectively so that he can have their apartment. You know, it's just despicable, horrible things that he's doing because he can. Yet in his mind, he's kind of going, yeah, but what would you do if you told someone to shake their hand and they just kept shaking their hand for days on end? What would you do if you had that power? Well, nobody else would do what he did.
Yeah,
Definitely. And it goes beyond that, in that the relationship we see between the antagonist and protagonist, the Jessica and Kilgrave, that in his mind, his relationship with her is still good. It is what he was doing for her was for the good of all of them. It was, he loved her and she loved him, and it was so twisted.
It's the fact that he can't separate between the control that he's forcing on somebody else. It's the fact that he can't separate that away from what is a real relationship. And that's kind of why he is an allegory for a rapist. I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of criticism of the show for actually taking it there and for actually calling out that Jessica feels like she was raped because they did have sex over that year. That's not the way the comic books play it. I believe they specifically say she was not raped by him. But he's an allegory for a rapist. He is a person that believes that by forcing himself on Jessica and for her going along with everything that he said, that means she agrees with it.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's, okay, you know, he is despicable and so on, but in his treatment of Jessica, it is the mundaneness of some of the things that he is trying to recapture, like the home and the the controlling home that it would be if she were to go back to him. The restaurant, was our favourite restaurant.
Yeah.
Come back here. That's the last place that Jessica wants to be after having, at one time broken away from him and escaped him. And now he's come back to haunt her. And that kind of flashing sort of recollection of Jessica, like when she's on the subway, of him there with her as well.
Yeah.
Even though he's not, and he's not projecting into her mind. I mean, I think maybe at the time we kind of thought that, but it's that he's always there, and in these places that they used to frequent when they were together. That is just as creepy and disturbing as any of the more violent, the more brutal aspects that Kilgrave brings. And I think he brings this also, the whole storyline, he brings it back to Luke Cage as well, where he gets Luke Cage to attack her, where he realizes that he could be a threat. But it then is a level deeper in that Jessica had shot Luke Cage's wife as well. So
while under his influence.
Yeah. So like the connections then with Luke Cage are really meaningful, and it's just done in a really nice layered way, this entire series, I think.
Yeah, I agree completely with you. And one thing I kind of want to bring in is that layering of the characters. It doesn't just extend to the main characters. This was the first, in my opinion, series where we started getting the introduction of other layered characters. We did see it to a degree in Daredevil season 1, but it was a tight-knit cast there. Here they introduced Luke Cage, and we start seeing the beginning of the formation of that character from an audience perspective. But I wanted to bring it to the other two powerful female figures in this show, and this is, again, we brought this up a lot in talking about how this was a showing the, again, as much as we can understand as males living in Ireland, the showing how powerful women can be in the world in the United States, for example. But that was Trish Walker, Patsy Walker, Hellcat herself, and Jerry Hogarth. And these two characters, and I remember we chanted Jerry a lot during this series, because the character we saw that was brought out was so bare knuckle, so brash, but we loved her for it. And then Patsy Walker, like having Patsy there, showing this side of a woman who was attacked as well, and then started training herself to become more secure in herself and like that understanding. And she still had that lock, she had the double padded doors, but then we actually did see that she also like started doing the Krav Maga and was training to protect herself.
Yeah,
it was brilliant.
Yeah,
great. And that's the support of Jessica as well, driving Trish to do that. And it's also the kind of challenge, because they're almost sisters. It's like that little challenge of Jessica has superpowers, I don't, but I'm still going to be a strong woman, I'm still going to fight for myself.
And Trish's abusive mother as well, you know, Dorothy, just that other side or different angle on sort of abuse as well. It really was layered, and even you have with the brother and sister upstairs in the flat above, where I think we postulated that she could be Typhoid Mary, but you know, we then also have with her, she was very domineering of her brother, who ultimately is slaughtered by Kilgrave in, that was a shocking moment.
Yeah.
It really was.
The innocents don't do very well in this show.
No, where he's dead on Jessica's bed, and in the same way as with the opening episode where Hope Schlottman, murders both her parents in the lift.
Yeah.
So this is...
And she has a very definitive end in the show, and a very difficult end, where she sacrifices herself so that Jessica doesn't have to hold herself back in her fight against against Kilgrave.
Absolutely. But I mean, by the end then of Jessica Jones season 1, after the 13 episodes, really, what we're left with is
Yeah,
Kilgrave.
kind of the big moments of where we're left before we get into the Defenders. So there's things that need to be tied up now, that can be tied up in the Defenders and could possibly lead into Jessica Jones season 2.
Yeah, so, Kilgrave is dead, and she has become essentially slightly estranged from Luke Cage as well, but she's retrieved the flash drive, which was full of the data that Luke Cage's wife had. So we're still to fully understand what's on that flash drive. Jessica has reopened Alias Investigations, presumably with Malcolm as an assistant as well, which is great. Loved Malcolm. And we have Will Simpson, who has been taken from the hospital by the his former special ops team from when he was in the army, with various pills, red pill, blue pill, green pill, white pill, that make him more powerful, and which we postulated could be leading him down a nuclear option to becoming Nuke.
Possibly, yeah. We will see. So of the kind of ending points for the show, obviously the big ending for the TV show, the definitive ending of Kilgrave, where his neck is snapped and he's dead. We talked about it during the time, and I think it was the best option. I think it was one of those great things. You've got a great character. Marvel's very used to keeping those characters alive, but throughout the series, Jessica had done everything. She captured him. She got the cops involved. She'd done everything that she possibly could, and her last option is to kill him. So that's kind of the end of that story, I suppose. Alias Investigations will continue, whether that be in Defenders or in Jessica Jones season 2. It seems like Alias Investigations is now reopened under Jessica. I think the two big pieces that will continue on is Will Simpson. What's going to happen to him? Where's he gone? So it's a big cliffhanger almost.
But you think that will be in Defenders or in Jessica season 2?
I feel that's Jessica season 2, definitely.
Yeah.
But the big one for me is the flash drive that had everything about IGH, all of that interesting information that had been taken by Luke Cage's wife. It will come into play in our Luke Cage recap, definitely. But it included things like all of the other kids that were experimented on alongside Kilgrave. There's loads of more information, and that hasn't really come back into things.
Do you
like Iron
think
Fist.
IGH might have something to do with Alexandra? I know she's the hand, but that a bit like with Rand Enterprises is a cover for it. That's why maybe we see, even though we said that boardroom could have been on the 13th floor of Rand Enterprises, that maybe it's a similar deal with IGH.
It's possible.
And that is another player, that flash drive for the Defenders. And certainly I suspect that with Alias Investigations being reopened, that, it seems from one of the trailers that she, might potentially bump into one of the Defenders through that route or something. You never know. But certainly all this baggage is very much still there within Jessica. And it'll be interesting now to see how much of it does come into the Defenders. I mean, I really hope that they don't necessarily treat them as a clean slate, and certainly at least from the trailer as well, we did see that, their friends are going to be hunted, and there's the idea that Trish is in danger, maybe Malcolm, whoever else associated with Jessica.
Yeah, I'm really hoping it's not something just like, Trish and Jessica are out for a night on the booze and they happen to bump into somebody else and then the adventure kicks off. I hope they have a little bit of it. And I kind of want to see something about IGH. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get much, guys. I think we'll get passing references, maybe. I think this will be more about bringing the team together. I think the continuation will be the reconciliation with Luke Cage. I think that's where this will come from. I think the data drive, IGH, and Will Simpson will be season 2.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that is where we're getting, in that this is Jessica's storyline, although there is, as you said, links to Luke Cage and potentials of where the experiments, etc. Yeah, we'll get to when we cover Luke Cage. But I think that is where season 2 will come from.
Right. You got to have something to take it on to season 2, don't you?
Exactly. And also, I kind of want this just to be the story. It's the origin of the team. They all have their own problems. Luke has his, Matt has his, Danny has his, although Danny's is slightly more intrinsically linked to the Defenders. But I think we'll get passing references, we'll get maybe some connection regarding Jerry, etc. There will be crossover.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think the 2 open questions regarding the flash drive and Will Simpson it's our season 2.
Definitely.
Excellent. Well, with that, that's our coverage of Jessica Jones. We'll be back with our coverage of Luke Cage on the next episode, the 13-episode series. If you want to hear our in-depth thoughts of Jessica Jones, just go to our website over at defenderstvpodcast.com and search for Jessica Jones. All 13 episodes of the show are up there. Or you can find them over on iTunes. Just search Jessica Jones and you should be able to pick up the podcast over there as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back with you next time.
Thank you very much, guys, and see you in the Defenders.
Yeah, I'm going to get a glass of whiskey.
Whiskey Watch.
Yeah, Whiskey Watch. As always, thank you for listening, and of course we will speak with you next time. Sorry, that's really Kilgravy of me. No, we will just speak with you next time. Bye.
Alias investigations. We've got cases and shit, so leave a message.
Record your message at the tone. Press any key or stop talking to end the recording.